Hi, everyone. I'm here with Michael Schratt for part two of our interview. We had a bit of a false start just now. You jumped in. I wasn't ready for you.
Okay.
We are talking about Leonard Stringfield, one of our mutually favorite
Right.
researchers and topics of conversation. Michael, first of all, everyone, I would encourage you to check out part one of our interview. It was awesome. Michael had a lot of great visuals to share. It was fabulous. I'll leave it there. What do you have to say about Stringfield and your research into him at this point?
Okay. So about almost the last 4 years now, I've been looking through Leonard Stringfield's crash retrieval cases, specifically his binder book that you had highlighted to me so many years ago, because all 7 status reports are in one publication now
Yeah.
that's about an inch and a half thick. And looking through this document, I mean, it's great material. It's not for the faint of heart. You have
It's
to
like
be really.
$100 on Amazon, but
Yes, it's a
I'm
hundred
telling
bucks
you,
on it,
it's
and it's
worth it.
worth every cent of it too.
Absolutely.
It's worth every cent of it. However, within that publication, there's really no drawings, no illustrations, no sketches, no full color
No,
rendering. So you're left with your own imagination to come up with a visual aid what these cases look like, which technically isn't bad, right? Because we want to use our own imagination. It's something, but personally, I like to see what these crash retrieval cases look like. I want to commit this to a visual aid so that I can really pin down what's actually going on here.
that's right.
Recently, MUFON has uploaded their Project Aquarius on their site, where they've uploaded a number of these original interviews, radio interviews with Leonard Stringfield. And it's just reinforcing what went on in the mid 70s, in the late 70s. And as you know, Richard, back in 1978, Leonard Stringfield delivered a paper at the MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, not
Yeah.
too far from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, called Retrievals of the Third Kind, where he highlighted a number of these firsthand military sources. Now, the backstory is once that paper was delivered, there was an immediate pushback because there were people in the audience that Leonard would not release the identities and names of his sources. And so there was pushback within the audience. How could people verify these cases if Leonard wouldn't release their names? But that's the original agreement that he made with his witnesses. Now, fast forward to 2024, or even just recently, when you look at these cases, there's a thread that goes through a lot of them. I want to give just one example. There's 3 cases within the Stringfield files that talk about lab coat technicians desperately trying to breach the hull of these craft with diamond tip drill bits. Absolutely 3 different locations, 3 different times, all talking about this diamond tip drill bit. So Richard, to me, that resonates as being something truthful.
Yeah. I
That
didn't pick
checks
that
out to
up.
me. That
This
checks
is
out to
really
me.
great that, someone needed to do what you are doing, which is you're going through each one of Stringfield's many cases. And it sounds like you're looking for specific data points in terms of patterns and things like this.
I'm looking at things that we
I
can
haven't done this
connect.
with Stringfield. I've done this with USOs. I have not done this with Stringfield, but I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah, I just think that when you look at the overhead 10,000-foot look down view, aerial view, and you take the cases separately, but then join them together so that you can put them into context. And now it's making more sense because
Mhm.
we've got multiple cases of these technicians with the diamond tip drill bits. We've got multiple cases of hieroglyphic type writing written on the sides of the craft. That's checking out. We've got so many cases, Richard, that you know about where these craft and bodies were sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That checks out with things that were said by Marion Black Mac Magruder. Black Mac Magruder was the gentleman who was sent to England to learn about night fighting. He came back and taught our American pilots about night fighting.
Mhm.
He said that in point of fact, the bodies are not at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but they are at Eglin Air Force Base in underground cold storage vaults there. So even he's confirming that, yes, the bodies have been moved to locations. They diversify their portfolio. This
Eglin
is
in
checking out.
Florida, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
I'm trying to
Yes.
remember where in Florida that is. Do you recall?
And so it's the caliber of these witnesses that are coming forward telling us that the bodies are certainly there, the craft was there. These people, these remaining Stringfield witnesses need to be tracked down, and they would be on another level of bringing this into congressional hearings.
How is it? Are there any sources where the original witness names are not redacted or where they can be read by somebody?
Now, I was able to get my hands on about a 5-page document, handwritten document that has a number of the witnesses. I've got some of their names. Now, within the Stringfield dictation notes that are kept by Cincinnati Lunken Airport, MUFON, they have more of the names. So some of those names are out there, not all of them. Now, I do want to mention too that back in 1991, prior to his death in 94, Leonard maintained a collection of 22 bank boxes of original correspondence letters, drawings, documents, the names, the address, and the phone numbers. Now, there was a 6-figure sum offered for that collection, and it was turned down. I spoke to a family member about 4 years ago, and I said, I'm very interested in preserving this history. Would it be possible to access the material? The exact quote I got is, what Leonard wanted published, he published, the rest of it was thrown away. So it is conceivable, Richard, that this most valuable holy grail research has now been thrown away for all time.
So the original names may not.
The original names.
Now you
yes.
said you have about 24 or so.
I've got a good 24 names. Yes, I do. Probably more than that. Yes.
But that may be it. There may not be the
I
original.
suppose that's the best we're going to get. Yep, that's probably the best we're going to get.
Do you have a
Now,
plan? Do you
I
intend to
believe
follow
this-
up on this?
I believe this gentleman was telling me the truth. He could have been lying. I don't know for sure, but I believe he was telling me the truth. He said that whatever Leonard wanted published, he published. The other things he did not publish because he had an agreement with his witnesses that he would, to his dying day, never reveal their names.
Yeah. It's quite believable. I mean, I never met Stringfield. I never had the pleasure, but that sounds like him. He was always
Yes.
was a man of his word. And
That's correct.
so it's unfortunate, obviously, because I mean, now here we are. It's been 30 years since he's been gone. And
Yes.
most of those witnesses are also gone. I'm sure very few of them are alive at this point.
I know.
Most
right.
of his interviews he was doing in the 1970s and 80s. He did a few in the 90s, but mostly in the 80s.
Correct.
And that's already that's 40 years ago.
I know. We're way beyond chasing the Undertaker, Richard. These people need to come forward. The names
However,
need, yeah.
you've got 24 names or so. Those people may not be alive, but maybe their children are alive.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
they're so do you have a plan as to how to go about chasing these people down?
I've tried to track them down. Now, there was a case which I think is my favorite Stringfield case, very briefly. In 1963, there was a U.S. Marine who was at Cherry Point, North Carolina. He was flown by plane with blacked out windows to an undisclosed location that he didn't even know what it was. Now, when he got to this building, they opened up these hangar doors. He looked inside. There was a 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that looked like a fat hamburger. It had 9 elliptically shaped opaque windows wrapped around the outer circumference. The whole thing was being propped up on scaffolding. This is something that I've heard multiple times, where these craft are propped up on engine test stands, pedestals, scaffolding, something. They're propped up on scaffolding. He saw white lab coat technicians try to breach the hull of the craft with diamond tip drill bits, with acetylene torches. They brought in a laser, and that didn't work. And he was there for 2 weeks. This is December 1963, guarding this craft. There was one time he said, and this is all in the Stringfield collection, that he was not frisked as he entered the facility. So he got a small German Minox camera into this facility. He took a shot of this thing. He has a photograph of it. And then he said that the photograph was lost in a flood back in 1983. We were this close, Richard, of getting a real good photograph. I mean, of course, I got all this illustrated. We did a replica of all this. We talked about this in one of our previous.
Yeah, I recall you
Yes.
did a wonderful, or your artist did a wonderful treatment of that.
Yep. So the point being, though, is that once the photograph was lost in a flood, that disappeared. And he basically said that there are some people who would be concerned about this new reality. But then there was another cross section of people that said, well, hey, this is going to interrupt my Monday night football. So he was making this demarcation between the reactions of the general public. And this is what you wrote about in your book, AD Disclosure, talking about this, the different cross sections of society, whether or not they could handle it. So
Yeah.
now it's been about 10 years since I tracked down the original gentleman who interviewed this Marine. I interviewed him on tape. He's the gentleman who referred this over to Leonard Stringfield. So I don't even know if that guy's alive anymore, but we do have his testimony.
Interesting. So is it just a dead end now with all of Stringfield's witnesses? Is there no
I
chance?
never want to say it's a dead end. I never want to say it's a dead end. I always have hope, but you know, we're way beyond racing the
Well,
undertaker.
you've got some names. Oh, I think the original people are probably no longer around, but maybe their kids, maybe
Yes.
some of them have sons or daughters who might be able to speak to it. I hope you can find some of these people. I mean, there's Facebook, there's different ways of researching some of these people, and
Right.
I don't know what. I mean, you've got other things you're working on. This might not be at the top of your list right now, but it is an interesting investigation.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think, Richard, that Leonard got just about closer than anyone, just from the caliber of the witnesses that he dealt with. And there were dozens and dozens of them. And all we need is one of them to be authentic, and it's game over. We've got it. It's game
Well,
over.
he I mean, everyone's been talking about David Grush, and now recently Lou Elizondo has gone back out and publicly stated that, yes, we have retrievals, there's bodies. But you are right about Stringfield. He, everyone's wondering, well, where are these classified witnesses? All Stringfield did it all 50
Yes.
years ago. He was doing this, or 40 years ago. And a lot of those people were they had their own clearances, or they were military people who had been exposed to this information. And he wrote it all up. His status reports are really excellent. And
I
I
mean,
know
it's
it's
just
expensive, but it is worth it.
it's just a gold mine of treasured information. One other
Yeah.
case, Richard. You know about the case of Mrs. G. She worked in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base back in 1955, and she basically said that there were 1,000 components that came into the base, 1,000 pieces from a UFO crash retrieval. Her job was to catalog these. They had this thing set up like an assembly line. There was one gentleman that took photographs of the debris. Then they moved it to the next section. It was bagged and tagged. They
Mm-hmm.
moved it over to Mrs. G, and then she cataloged it. So
Yeah.
there's got to be this immense warehouse at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with all this bagged and tagged UFO crash retrieval debris with file numbers, everything on there. And basically she said, she was dying of cancer. Her last statement is, what can Uncle Sam do to
Yes,
me
sir.
once I'm in my grave? 6 months later,
Exactly.
she died. She died. So I don't think she's lying to us.
I don't, that story, I remember that one quite
Yes.
well. She actually told that wasn't directly to Stringfield.
No, it was to Mr. Wilhelm.
Yeah, Charles
Yes.
Wilhelm,
Yes.
who was
Mhm.
a researcher, and he was, I believe, her next door neighbor or something like that. He was a teenager, and she took a shine to him, and
That's very well done, Richard. That's very well
she
done.
was dying of cancer,
Mhm.
and she said the
Why would
government.
this lady lie? Why would she lie?
No,
What does she have to
exactly.
gain?
Yeah, no, the stories come from all of these different perspectives and angles, and the consistency is what gets me, and I think what gets you or anyone who really dives into it. You read the consistency, and you realize this is not an op. These are just regular people. They are
They're
reporting.
regular people.
They're
That's right.
reporting the story as well as they know, and
Correct.
um, they've been silenced for all of these years. But this is such a massive reality, mind-blowingly huge.
Right.
I mean, just put yourself in the position of the Pentagon, of the government. If you're
Mhm.
someone who actually has control over this information, and you realize how big it is,
Exactly.
it's not
Exactly.
hard to see that they would be very hesitant before opening this whole can of worms. I was going to say can of whoop ass. It's both can of worms and can of whoop
Right.
ass on them. It's just
Right.
such a huge thing.
They always talk about, Richard, about the lack of physical evidence and the lack of hardware to prove any of this. Well, let's run to ground what Mrs. G talked about. Let's find those 1,000 components that came from a crash retrieval.
Yeah.
Someone's got to get access to it. Someone has to know where it is. That could be brought into congressional hearings, and I'd like to see their response to that.
I'm sure you are very well familiar. This is not a Stringfield case, but James Clarkson, who's witnessed June Crain,
Yes.
was
Oh, yes.
also an administrative assistant over at Wright-Pat in the early
That's right.
50s and had almost the exact same types of things to say.
Exactly.
And she's on audio. People can listen to her audio recordings. I have the book. He did extensive interviews with her.
Right.
And June Crain is, you listen to her or read what she has to say, and there is no question that she was 100% on the level, describing the chit chat with the officers at Wright-Pat. I think, I'm sure she was a cute young woman. They love to chat her up. And she just was able to talk with these men on a certain limited basis. And she also picked up a lot of information about craft and bodies at Wright-Patterson back in the early 50s.
Yeah.
It was there. There's just so many of these stories. They just keep coming in from all of these directions.
Yep. I don't think we can discount all of them, Richard. We just can't.
No.
We just can't. Nope.
No, very interesting. Well, look, I'm always glad to talk with you, Michael, and to catch up. I want members of the site here to know about your YouTube channel. It's just Michael Schratt on YouTube. I'm going to link to it. I did this for the first part of our interview, which is public, which is going on YouTube. But I'm really excited, and as I mentioned before, Tracy and I both really like your channel a lot. You do fantastic presentations on really just all aspects of UFO history. And, I think one of your great specialties is in organizing these beautiful graphic recreations of classic parts of our history that otherwise would be lost. And you do a lot of that there. So I would tell people to check out your channel and go subscribe. Subscribe to Michael's channel. It's absolutely worth it. You do new programs, am I right in thinking Wednesdays? Or
No
is there a
specific date,
schedule?
no specific date, but try to get it at least one a week. Yes.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's wonderful. So I'm really glad that you're doing that. Anything else on the horizon? Anything else that you're doing?
I think that's about it, Richard. I think that's about it.
All right.
Try to keep the dream alive,
Well, we will, you and I will always chat privately whenever the need arises, and I'm sure that will be before long. We always do. And it's good to see you again. You look great, and I very much enjoyed getting together with you for this.
Wonderful. Thanks, Richard.
All right. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, members of the site. I'll catch you again all real soon. Bye for now.